Well, good evening, everyone, and welcome to tonight's conversation about women deacons. My name is Sister Colleen Gibson. I'm a sister of St. Joseph, and I'll be your host and your guide for tonight. And so as we wait for people to kind of come in, we know some people get here right at 7:30 or whatever time it is where you are locally. We'll just give people a couple of minutes to come in. And so I'll just give you a little bit of background as we begin. Some of you are old hat and you're with us each month, and some people are new to this conversation. So if you're new to the conversation, welcome. And if you've been with us before, welcome back. We're happy to have all of you. Tonight's conversation with Dr. Phyllis Zagano is going to focus on why and how did Vatican II restore the diaconate as a permanent vocation and for men only. And so the way that our conversations typically work is it's broken into two parts. Tonight's conversation will be recorded, and so it'll be available in the coming days on Dr. Zagano's webpage. And there will be a link I'll put in the chat box to you so you can find out what Phyllis is up to, and you'll be able to access this webinar and past webinars, which have all been recorded. So tonight's conversation, like I said, will be broken into two parts. And so we'll begin. Phyllis will offer us a little bit of input on tonight's focus topic. And then after about 10 or 15 minutes of input, we'll open up the floor for a conversation, for question and answer. And so many people have submitted questions in advance of tonight's conversation. So I have those here with me. And then if as you're listening to Phyllis speak, or as you're following the conversation in the chat, or as you just, if something strikes you, if the spirit moves you, I'd invite you, by using the chat function, which is on the bottom of your Zoom screen, you can send a message directly to me, directly to Colleen Gibson, and I'll take those questions and add them to my list. And so we'll keep the conversation going and try to keep it lively. So I think that covers most things. You can also, just a couple more little housekeeping items, you can sign up to receive Phyllis's column, and I'll put a link for that. She writes the Just Catholic column for the National Catholic Reporter. So I'll put a link for that in the chat. And you can mark your calendar looking ahead for Monday, December 14th will be our next webinar conversation. And then in January, we'll be meeting East Coast on a Tuesday, January 12th. And I'll give you those dates again at the end of our time together. And so as we come together in these crazy times, maybe let's just take a moment and pause and ready ourselves for the conversation that we'll engage in tonight. And so by way of introduction to Dr. Phyllis Zagano, in case you don't know, Dr. Zagano is the Senior Research Associate in Residence and Adjunct Professor of Religion at Hofstra University. She's the author or editor of over 23 books in religious studies, including her newest offering, for Paulus Press, which is entitled Women Icons of Christ. Dr. Zagano also has published Women Deacons, Past, Present, and Future, Women in Ministry, Emerging Questions on the Diaconate, Mysticism and the Spiritual Quest, and Women Deacons, Essays with Answers. Her award-winning Just Catholic column runs monthly in the National Catholic Reporter. Her work has won numerous awards and has been translated around the world. In August of 2016, Pope Francis appointed her to the Papal Commission for the Study of Women in the Diaconate, which completed its report to the Pope at the end of 2018. And so tonight it is our great pleasure to engage her in conversation and to continue this conversation around women deacons. And so we delve more deeply into this important topic. And so without further ado, I'll hand it over to Phyllis.
Thank you so much, Colleen. Really, it's always a delight to be here and to be here with you hosting. The topic that some folks recommended that I use is the topic of what happened. You know, how did the diaconate come about? And it's a very interesting story. In the 19th century, actually, someone named a Frankfurt doctor named Passavant wrote to a friend who eventually became the Cardinal Archbishop of Breslau, and he wrote and said, you know, it would be a good idea if the priesthood and the diaconate were kind of rethought, that the priesthood was really too divorced from the people of God, and that the diaconate was necessary. And I bring this up not only because it's more than, you know, it's 160 years ago this letter came out, but it's also because the emphasis was on the needs of the people. And the fact of the matter is, the needs of the people are what can and will drive the needs of the church today. I was just talking to someone today who works in a food bank near where I live, and they expect 400 people for Thanksgiving food, which is about twice what they did last year. In any event, the letter really speaks in 1840 about the possibilities of the diaconate, and as things go on. In Germany, particularly, there's a Caritas movement, and when you get to the end of the 19th century, it is getting more and more developed. But it's during Hitler's rise to power in the 1930s that there becomes a greater understanding and a depth of it, and we have documentation of in Priesterblocker in block 26 in the camps of priests actually discussing this in Germany. In any event, if we really fast forward, in 1951 we find a group of young social workers who form a diaconate circle, and I think that's an important thing to think about, the diaconate circle, because and they did it in Freiburg in Germany. They actually published working papers for about 14 years, from 1952 until 1966. Now, by that time, the Second Vatican Council was actually considering restoring the diaconate as a permanent vocation. Now, during the intervening years, of course, other deacon circles grew in Germany, in France, and in Austria, and in Latin America. And then these joined together to form what's called the International Diaconate Circle, which was based in Freiburg. In 1962, the members of the International Diaconate Circle petitioned the bishops of Vatican II, asking that the diaconate be restored as permanent vocation. And that's a very interesting thing, that you find men, mostly married men, who had a feeling that this was something that should and could be developed by the church, actually getting involved. And when I was reading about this today, it's almost like the Rapam activities during the council, the 2019, the 2019 Council Synod for the Amazon. You had Rapam talking to the people of God, and they came and they actually set up offices. Rapam set up offices on the Via della Conciliazione in Rome, in Santa Maria in Transportina. But the analogy I'm making is that the diaconate circle during the Second Vatican Council set up offices in Rome to act as a resource for the council fathers. Now, at the council, what happened? Well, obviously, we didn't get women deacons. One of the big discussions was whether the deacons who it seemed were coming down the pike could or could not be married. There was a lot of objection to two things. One, to married deacons, which eventually did pass, but the other was to ordaining younger men, celibate men, unmarried men, who would then be allowed to marry. And these are kind of two separate things, because in the history of the churches, East and West, an ordained man really can't get married, whereas a married man can get ordained. In any event, during the council, objections obviously arose, and one of the objections was to restoring the diaconate. Very much like some of the objections I've heard today against women in the diaconate. There were two cardinals, one from Cologne and another from France, one from Cologne in Germany, another one from France, And the one from France was the Dean Emeritus. He was the retired Dean of the Roman Rota, which is the Supreme Court. They each expressed concern as to how the restoration would affect the lay apostolate. And you see this all the time. Well, the deacons can only do what lay people can do what deacons can do, so we don't need deacons, which of course is a false argument. But it's one that's raised today with the question of women in the diaconate, and the point that many diaconal functions were at that time during the Second Vatican Council already performed by laypersons was actually advanced as a reason not to ordain men to the permanent vocation, and that was countered by discussions by Cardinal Leo Suenens, who was then the Archbishop of Brussels. So the discussion about women in the diaconate, as I said, has historically been truncated. It's been squashed by the Vatican. It's been resurrected by the Vatican. But what I find interesting in the history of the development of and passage of the Vatican, the diaconate by the Second Vatican Council, specifically in Lumen Gentium and in Gaudium et Spes, 2 documents of the Vatican Council. What I find most interesting is that the voice of the people was heard and diaconate circles were called. And so, and I know that in the United States, at least, there's 2 efforts, or there's 2 efforts. One happened already, and there's another one ongoing that are kind of vocational discernment circles for women. The one that ran, I think over the summer, had 45 people online, all Zoom. And the one that's running now, started November 29th, has about 21 people. So I guess what I'm speaking in terms of hopefulness, that if it's something that people are talking about, it's something that I think people that may in fact come about. So if Colleen has questions, and somehow I think I don't know what's on your screen, but I've got a big green telephone on my screen.
Well, you're good to go. I've got plenty of questions. Don't worry, just we'll make our way through this. So we have a number of questions, and I remind you, if you have a question, something that Dr. Zagano has mentioned, feel free to send me a question in the chat. A question that pertains to what you were just talking about, Phyllis, that came in is, what about Vatican II made the time right for permanent deacons, and how could that translate to now? This idea that, they had already formed these circles, these diaconal circles, and they were, then they moved to Rome during Vatican II. What could that look like now? Like, what could grassroots meetings or diaconal circles look like today?
Well, just as I said, there's the effort by Father Luke Hansen in Cincinnati and Casey Stanton in North Carolina, Dare to Dream or Dream Discern. I'm not quite sure the exact title.
It's called To Conspire. I think it's something along those lines. Yeah. Well,
they're running a very interesting program. They began with a September 3rd St. Phoebe Day celebration, and they had testimony from 3 or 4 women who really feel called to the diaconate. And I've heard, by the by, in other locations, other dioceses, women actually go to their bishops and say, look, we want to talk to you about this. This is something that we feel the church is ready for. I don't think it's reached the gravitas of the deacon circles in the 1950s and 60s in Germany, but I think it very well could. Particularly given the kinds of communication we have now. People, it doesn't take too much to get 4 or 5 people together discussing this question. And I think that is really where it needs to go. I can't control, maybe I can control the narrative, I can control the facts, but I can't control the discussion. And I think I shouldn't control the discussion. It belongs to the Holy Spirit. The Holy Father definitely wants people to talk about this. And you might know better than I, Colleen, if there are younger people who are interested, who are discussing the matter, how they discuss it. I haven't really dipped into what Father Hansen and Casey Stanton are doing, but I understand their groups are made up of mostly the 18 to 30 crowd who are interested in church work. Now, they may not all be interested in being deacons, but they're interested in something. And I think that's hopeful enough, you know, given the state of the church and given the bad news we've had in the last couple of weeks. Anyway.
I think you're right, Phyllis. I think it is. Somebody asked a question about, like, is it a matter of lifting up our voices, or, you know, speaking about it? I think it is. It's these places where conversation is happening, and how the conversation is happening. And so I put the link in there to the Dream, Discern, and Scheme program that Father Luke Hansen runs. And I'll put a link in to the St. Phoebe Day prayer that ReceiveHerInTheLord.org did, which has a lot of that testimony, and I think continuing that conversation. One of the questions that came in ahead of time, Phyllis, we have people on our call tonight, people who have been engaged in this conversation for a long time, and some people who are brand new to the conversation. So this might be a more basic question, but what are the areas of greatest need that could be served better by women deacons?
Well, women, you know, to begin with, you know, in the 12th century, when the diaconate was dying out, it actually lasted longer. The ordination of women to the diaconate as a diaconal function, doing ministry, lasted longer than the ordination of men to the diaconate to do diaconal ministry. By this I mean, by the time you get to the 10th, 11th, 12th century, even the 9th century in Rome, the diaconate for men, it becomes almost purely ceremonial. You know, they're the ones riding the two horses in front of the Pope to the St. John Lateran. And all they do, or all we know they do, is handle the liturgical functions of the deacon. Period. Whereas as the diaconate is progressively pushed into the abbeys and monasteries, abbesses are ordained as deacons, but also we have evidence where in many monasteries, 3 or 4 other sisters are ordained as deacons because they have to be the heavy to lead prayer. They also need to be the ones to minister to ill women. So when we get to the 11th, 12th century, the women deacons are doing diaconal ministry. What are they doing? The abbesses are reading the gospel in their abbeys and monasteries. They're preaching. They are ministering as giving last rites and sacraments to ill sisters. And interestingly enough, when the discussion came up in the Orthodox Church of Greece, which is not the Greek Orthodox Church, in the Orthodox Church of Greece, one of the arguments was that there was a need for women deacons in monasteries, specifically to minister to ill women. Part of this is you really can't get a priest to get up so easily to get up the mountain. But also it's unseemly in many cultures to have men ministering intimately to ill women. I'm not in my book. I talk about hearing confessions. Really, it's only in the 16th century that deacons are eventually really forbidden to hear confessions, and we know that abbesses and prioresses did hear confessions. Because of the change from it being a purely juridical function, purely a legal function well, actually, because it became more a legal function than one of healing. And so, I mean, I go into the weeds with that in my book, but it's the difference, I debated at the seminary, actually, at St. Charles Borromeo Seminary in Philadelphia. A good number of years ago, Sarah Butler, who was a missionary sister of the Servant of the Most Blessed Trinity, MSBT, who at the behest of Cardinal Ratzinger wrote a book against women priests. And one of the, or I challenged a priest at that seminary who I'd been in conversation with to debate, and he read my book and said he wasn't able to do it. And but would I debate Sarah Butler? And I said, sure. The end of this story is at one point Sarah Butler said, in history, women deacons only ministered to other women. And I said, well, who ministers to women today? And you know, so the first reason is the first reason, you know, the ministry and the witness. And I had a priest of the Archdiocese of New York today say to me, it's ridiculous there are no women cardinals, let alone women deacons. Of course, we should have women deacons so they can preach, to have the witness and the intuition and the intelligence of women coming from the pulpit. To which I said, well, also the symbolism of a woman being vested and being legitimately called an icon of Christ by the church. Anyway, I'm going on too long. Do you have more questions?
Oh, we've got plenty of questions, I think, but I think it's informative. I think it helps to lay a good groundwork for our discussion. It gives us a lot of background. A question that just came in, actually came in from a former student of yours from Fordham, Phyllis. And so they ask, can a female diaconate be established in a local way, or does it require a mandate from Rome for women deacons to be?
Actually, that was a vote at the Vatican Council. And the question was, how will this work? And the determination of the council and the way it rolled out is that the Episcopal Conference, in our case in the United States, would be the U.S. Conference of Catholic Bishops, who are meeting actually right now, would discuss the matter and determine that they wanted to get permission from Rome to institute this ministry in their province in the United States. Then it would be up to the local ordinary, the local diocesan bishop, to decide whether or not he wanted women in deacons. There's one diocese in the United States that I think still does not include men deacons, except for fellows that have moved there. But I wouldn't want to be the bishop of a diocese. And once women deacons are approved universally, I wouldn't want to be the bishop to say no. I don't think that would be a really smart thing to do.
Mm-hmm. Phyllis, you mentioned, that the U.S. bishops are meeting this week for their annual meeting. Do you know, is the question of women deacons being raised? Another question came in along the lines of, are there bishops in the United States or elsewhere who are willing to consider women deacons?
Yes, there are. Well, who support the topic. One is Bishop McElroy in San Diego, and the other is Calvo in Reno, Nevada. There are other bishops I've spoken to who have not been so public in their support, but they certainly support me. A lot of this, I don't get that, because then they're acting as if they're merely regional vice presidents, of the organization. They're not actually bishops of their own territories. And I say that because in history, before things got more and more centralized in Rome, bishops were doing what bishops did. We know that women were ordained up to the 12th century because the Bishop of Lucca in Italy did it. Despite arguments in synods in France that they couldn't have women deacons, despite the fact that Pope Gelasius, actually in the 5th century, was complaining about women deacons. I have never found a ruling against ordaining women as deacons that rises to the level of the universal church. So the reverse of what we were talking about earlier is actually true. You'd find local synods that said they didn't want women deacons. Well, why would they say that? Well, because some bishops in their territory were ordaining women as deacons. We have a lot of evidence of people complaining, bishops complaining about women deacons. Well, why are they complaining? They're complaining. It's like, why would you call the exterminator if you didn't have ants? I mean, it's probably a bad analogy, but they keep complaining that, these women deacons are there, and so we need to get rid of them. And I think that's the way many of these fellows looked at women, and perhaps still do.
So even the mention indicates that there was something going on, even if the documentation isn't fully there. It was very interesting.
Exactly. And the other thing is, women's monasteries were often taken over as they died out, were taken over by local ordinaries, by local secular bishops. And the records of those monasteries were not very well preserved, because who cares? They're just women. But we do have the names of, I somewhere I wrote, and I may have put it in this book, I have the names of 4 bishops, and I have the ceremonies they use, and I think I might even have the names of the women they ordained. Now, that's not to say there's not more women ordained. We have hundreds named. We have 23 women who are saints in the universal calendar, who are known as deacons, as ordained deacons. So yeah, they're there, and they're there for a long time.
That's fascinating. A question that we get so often, and it's a question I don't know if you necessarily can answer, Phyllis, but I will ask it because it comes in so often. It came in a lot this time. The question is, what's taking so long? And maybe to put a finer point on that, one of the questions that came in is, what is the sticking point? Is the conversation hung up on tradition and history? Couldn't the Pope just say, let's have women deacons? But all of those questions kind of lead us back to, what's taken so long? Why are we into a second commission?
Oh, well, there are a couple of questions in there. Why is it taking so long? Well, who's making the decision? I mean, it's men deciding that they want to allow women to be in the clerical caste. Why did it take so long for the American military to see women officers the same as men officers? There used to be 2 separate chains of command there. So there's that. In terms of why is there a second commission, well, I can say a couple of things. I was on the first commission. We were tasked. It's been publicly discussed that we were asked to discuss the history of and what did they do? What did women deacons do? And the Holy Father brought up some very interesting things, including one thing I never heard of, that when women were accusing their husbands of beating them, they would go to the woman deacon who would examine the bruises and then bring the testimony to the diocesan ordinary, to the bishop. That to me is extraordinary. And I've heard him say that in person. And I also heard him say that twice, I think, to the International Union of Superiors General, who in 2016, at their triennial meeting in May 2016, asked for a commission to which I was appointed just a few months after that. So my commission finished its work in June of 2018. The Holy Father gave part of the results of our work to the UISG in 2019. In May, I was in the room when he handed over the documents. And he said he wanted to think about it more. He said something he can't go against revelation. Very interesting kind of comment. Well, he can't go against revelation. That to me is helpful because to my understanding, Revelation says we're all made in the image and likeness of God. And the argument against ordaining women is that women cannot image Christ. So it's got to be one thing or the other. In any event, in the Amazon Synod in 2019, in October, you had 9 of the 12 language groups asking for women deacons. The final documents said we wanted women to be installed as lectors and acolytes. And then they also said, and we'd like you to tell the commission that we're kind of interested in women deacons. And he said, well, you've thrown down the gauntlet and I'll pick it up. And he later said, I'll add 2 or 3 people to the commission. And I heard nothing. And then on April 8th of this year in 2020, he named 5 men and 5 women with a new chairman, the Cardinal Archbishop of Aquila in Italy, and Father Denis Dupont-Fauville, a French priest who is a staffer at the Congregation for the Doctrine of the Faith as a secretary. And that's all I know. The information I have is they have not met, although my intuition and my understanding would be that that they're competent to talk about what does a deacon do. And, a book that I received today and that you, Sister Colleen, mentioned to me, The Deacon, Icon of Christ, the Servant Minister of the Threshold by Deacon Tim O'Donnell in Boston, basically says that that's the discussion. The discussion should be, what does a deacon do? And then the further point is, well, what about this can a woman not do? Why is it taking so long? Well, it's Rome, number one. Number two, it's men, and we don't have any women in the decision-making process. So you can see that there's a tension right there. It is what it is.
Yeah, it's very interesting. A question that came in, Phyllis, someone heard you speak in Denver a few years back, and you had just learned that Pope Benedict had agreed to the question of women deacons should be addressed. But then he spoke about an additional line of ordination, ordination for service, along with ordination for governance. And I think so often when we talk about deacons and women deacons, there becomes this question of, the vocation to service, the vocation to governance. And the questioner says you were really excited that evening, which got them really excited. And so they wanted to know, is that still the line of discussion when we talk about women deacons? Are people still parsing that out, ordination for governance and ordination for service?
Yeah, I think well, first of all, I don't think I've been in Denver in about 15 years. So you'll excuse me if I don't remember. But I do know that in 2006, Pope Benedict the 16th said to the priests of Rome that he basically separated the diaconate and the priesthood. The question of one of the priests was, why can't we have more women in ministry? And he said, well, this is precisely the point. And Due Bonaro, there are two tracks, the priesthood and the diaconate, and they don't cross. And that's probably what I was pretty excited about if they heard me there at Regis University in Denver. I think that the discussion about Sacre Potestas, sacred power, needs to be understood that actually there's the power of governance, and there's the power of sacrament. And the church has over the years actually brought these all back to the priesthood. And that redounds to the discussion that priests were having in Rome between the 9th and the 12th century, where they really didn't like deacons. Deacons were too powerful. Why were deacons too powerful? Because deacons handled the money. And anybody in any organization knows, you've got to be friendly with the admin officer if you want to get anything done. So they kind of got rid of the diaconate, as I said earlier, and the discussion, I think, is ongoing. I think the big fear, and this has been said to me by a lot of people, not necessarily involved in the discussion, that the fear is that this is the slippery slope, that, oh, well, then you'll get women priests. Well, so what? But also, if you believe what the church teaches, that the church does not have the authority to ordain women priests, why are you bringing this up? You either believe what the church teaches or you don't. If you don't believe this is what the church teaches, well, fine. But if you do believe what the church teaches, that women cannot be ordained as priests, then you have no argument to make. And the individuals who present this most forcefully are those who are against the ordination of women deacons, are the ones who can make the decision. That is the problem, that they're so fearful that this would portend to the world women priests. And so that, and in fact, you know, Colleen, in Rome during the Amazon Synod, there were two cardinals, one inside the synod and one outside the synod, who were running around saying that Ordinatio Sacerdotalis in 1994, which says that the church does not have the authority to ordain women as priests, that Ordinatio Sacerdotalis forbids women deacons. But it doesn't, number one. And number two, the secretary to the International Theological Commission at the time, Georges Cotier, said, you know, no, it doesn't. We're not speaking about women deacons in these documents, either in 1976 with Inter Inseniores or in 1994 with Ordinatio Sacerdotalis. I was told at that time by the highest placed woman in Rome, in the Vatican, a woman who was basically at the undersecretary level in one of the Vatican commissions, that they can't say no. They just don't want to say yes. So they will keep kicking the ball down the road. That's basically the can, I guess, is the expression. You kick the can down the road.
That's very interesting. A couple of questions, because you mentioned kind of the holy orders and the path to priesthood. We always get questions around that. One of the questions that came in this time, Phyllis, is, you know, if women are ordained as deacons, would they also qualify to be ordained priests, since there's just one sacrament of ordination, and once ordained, they've received the sacrament of holy orders?
Well, holy orders is determined in 3 grades or 3 ranks. And if you are saying that every deacon is qualified to be a priest, if you have to be ordained, able to be ordained a priest to be ordained a deacon, then you've got 47,000 deacons in the world who are going to be out of work pretty soon, because the church, at least in the Western or Latin Rite, does not ordain married men. And most of the 47,000 deacons in the world are married. Plus the fact, then you're saying that they're all can be bishops too. The confusion is from a thing called the cursus honorum, which became law in the 12th century. And that really is the stepping stones to advancement, really parallel to that in the Roman military political system. And eventually it became law that unless you could be ordained a priest, you were not allowed to be ordained a deacon. And so only men entered the cursus honorum. They were first tonsured, and then they were brought into the minor orders of porter and lector and exorcist and acolyte, and then ordained to the major orders. Now, you became a porter, a lector, an exorcist, or an acolyte in the sacristy, but then at the altar in the mass, you're ordained a subdeacon, then a deacon, and eventually a priest. But except ceremonially, very, very few people, very few men were ordained as deacons and then not ordained as priests. And of course, we see that today. And that's, I think, where the confusion arises. We have what's called the temporary or the transitional diaconate, to which men are ordained before they become priests. But then there are men, some, I forget what the number is, 18 or 19,000 in the United States, who have accepted the diaconate and have been accepted by their bishops to the permanent vocation of deacon. And they're not expected to be priests. Vocation directors for the diaconate have told me if someone's coming to be a deacon because he can't be a priest or because he wants to be a priest, he's not going to get very far in formation. So it's a separate order. You need to think of it more as a triangle. You know, the deacon works for the bishop and the priest works for the bishop. Whereas in our experience, we think that the deacon works for the priest. It's really an assignment from the bishop with faculties from the bishop. And I'll kind of presage one question here. What happens if a woman religious is ordained as a deacon? She's missioned by her general superior, period. She gets faculties from the bishop, just as a religious man does, but she's missioned by her superior. She's not missioned by the bishop.
I think that's a great image too, to help us understand, Phyllis, that image of the triangle, that it isn't necessarily a hierarchy or like a pecking order. The diaconate isn't a stepping stone on the way to the priesthood. These are vocations that have different calls to them. Going on that question line of call and the nature of the vocation, one questioner who sent in a question beforehand said, do you think a more effective argument for women deacons would be based on better filling the needs of others rather than empowering women in the church? Seeing that an argument of empowering women might trigger opposition by those who fear a quote unquote power grab by ambitious women who'd like to dismantle the church's patriarchal structure. So I guess the question between, how do we approach the argument for women deacons as you balance out service versus power?
Yeah, well, obviously, I've been told, women who want to be deacons just want power, and women who want to be ordained as deacons just want power. I said, by that argument, you shouldn't ordain anybody. I mean, are you saying that men who want to be ordained only want power? No, of course, just as with the formation of the deacon circles that we began discussing earlier, it's about the needs of the people of God. And the church, I really believe the church will not be denied what it needs. And as women come to the fore, as women decide that there are ways in which they feel called to witness the gospel. I mean, the deacon is the carrier of the gospel, and the deacon is the one who is really to preach in the famous words that St. Francis probably did not say, preach always, use words if necessary. So I think that the power argument to me is specious. And if they say women who want to be ordained want power, I say, well, men who want to be ordained want power. So there, it just doesn't make any sense to me.
Shifting gears, Phyllis, a little bit, a question came in around married couples. So the questioner says, what influence might opening the diaconate to women have on married couples, and married couples who might want to, pursue the diaconate together? Can you speak a little bit to that?
Yeah, well, you have to talk to them, but I know in Mexico, in I guess around 40 years ago, there is a story that a bishop ordained 400 married couples as deacons, men and women. That all kind of disappeared, and so did he. But there are people. Let me back up. In order to be accepted into formation, one has to have the permission, if one is married, the permission of one's spouse, and so it becomes a joint vocation at the very beginning. Bill Dykewig has done a lot more reading and writing on this than I have about the role of the married couple in the diaconate, but I wouldn't see any. They would be handled individually. As not as a couple. The vocations will be discerned individually by the vocation minister in the diocese or in the religious institute, but they the only question. One thing I brought up in a book I wrote somewhere is the question that the church doesn't know how to think about. Assuming this individual is a secular, the woman is a married woman, a married secular woman. The church doesn't know how to think about a woman incarnated, a married woman incarnated in a church who would be responsible to her bishop because she's got a husband. I don't think that the church can think about that well enough. But I think the married couple are like, come here, give me a break, but so I don't know. I don't know. That's kind of further down the road. But I will say that many of the women, the younger women that I've spoken to, I don't know about you, but the younger women that I've spoken with are married, who find a vocation to the diaconate, and they're already involved in church work as lay ecclesial ministers. So if they can do that, why not? Why can't they be ordained? I mean, but you have talked, I think, to more of the younger folks, and you probably have a better view of this.
Yeah, I think there's a desire to engage in the ministry of the deacon, and like you said, in lots of ways, there are women, whether married or single or religious, who are engaging in those ways as pastoral associates working. We've talked in the past about service, doing the work of service on the streets, doing that work. There's a desire, I think, to preach, and that comes across, and to carry out really those works of mercy and those diaconal works. And so I think there's a desire there. And so trying to find a pathway for that. That leads into a question that came in, and maybe you can speak a little bit to this. The questioner wanted to know if you could speak a little bit about the effects the denial of the diaconate to women will have or is having on younger women.
Yeah, well, that could be your department too. I think that the effect is that they're saying, they don't care. They're not. I think younger women whom I meet are kind of dissuaded from getting involved with any church work because they don't trust the bishops. They don't trust the men of the church, period. And it's a difficult discussion. Some leave Catholicism and go to other Christian denominations. Some find ways in secular social work, to serve outside the church. I think that the forestalling of the decision is damaging the church. And as I said earlier, they can't say no. They just don't want to say yes. Because if they say no, they're going to see the backs of more women. Having said that, I will tell you, this is a very live discussion around the world. Just today, I had correspondence, and I made a list because I was really amazed. Today, I had correspondence from Belgium, Portugal, the Ivory Coast, Canada, Australia, the United States, and I had to write a letter to somebody in Italy. People are really talking about it and asking about it. I had a woman who's 42 in a small village in the north of Italy write me a couple of really big, long letters. How can she participate in the church more? And now here's the kicker. Her husband is an Episcopal priest, and she wants to be Catholic. She's Catholic and she wants to do more. So I just say the Holy Spirit's in charge. And I think Francis says the same thing, that he's listening. And I was told this, that bishops who came from the ad limina meetings last year, when the female diaconate was brought up to the Holy Father, he said, I'm listening for the Holy Spirit. Well, there was big wind in my town last night. And I just hope that that the Holy Spirit is really blowing through and somehow blowing these women who are on the edges towards the center. I want to encourage women that something has to happen. It just has to happen, because the only arguments against the ordination of women are that women cannot image Christ. The argument, oh well, they weren't really ordained; they were just blessed. That's specious, because the ceremonies are the same. You can't tell me, and I've said this publicly, you can't tell me the Holy Spirit says I can't do it. It's a girl. It's a stupid comment that women cannot receive receive this sacrament. And the joke about the little girl, how many the priest walks in and the first grader, how many sacraments are there? 6. No, there are 7. No, there are 6. 6 for boys and 7. 7 for boys and 6 for girls. And it's not funny anymore. And I think the more discussion that we have here every month, with a couple of hundred folks, to encourage them to get out there and do something. Pick up the phone, call somebody, write a letter to the editor, get a group to discuss. We have my books and probably others, where there are parish study guides online for these books, and to pray about it. The church will not be denied what it needs, and I truly believe that. I really do. Anyway, you've got more questions. We only have a few minutes, so.
Yeah, and I think it's important, as you said, Phyllis. These deeper conversations are happening. It's deep water, and there's movement, but you can't necessarily see it. And so, how do we bring these conversations to the surface? And you mentioned some of those ways. To write letters, to be in these conversations, to talk with the people. The people at the food pantry, the people in your parish, to have these conversations. A question came in from a deacon. He wanted to know, are deacons vocally or actively supporting women in the diaconate? We talked about, bishops who have been outspoken or say they support women deacons. Are there deacons who support?
Yes, there are. And this book by Deacon Tim O'Donnell in Cambridge, Massachusetts is, as I said, I didn't get to read the whole thing today because I just got it this afternoon, but it's like it's a no-brainer and it's not a big deal. I think the attitude now for educated deacons and deacons who've been in the field are, what do we do that a woman can't do? However, having said that, you will still find a tremendous amount of clericalism that it has infected the diaconate. And so you will find deacons who will fall down a dead faint if you talk about women in the diaconate. A couple of years ago, actually in my diocese, I was trying to get some deacons together. This was before I was appointed to the commission. I tried to get some deacons together just to talk about it. I was doing research. And I just wanted to get 4 or 5 or 6 deacons in my diocese together and talk about women deacons. And the I guess head deacon or whatever he is in the diocese got a hold of the email, and I have it somewhere because a deacon who is a friend of mine sent it to me. He sent this huge diatribe about how I was a terrible person and it was really an awful topic, and I really was only looking for women priests and they should not talk to me. No deacon in the diocese should talk to me. And I was like, this guy's crazy, first of all. But secondly, that is an attitude that is simmering in some diaconal groups in some dioceses. So it's out there. And you'll find the same with some bishops. You'll find the same with some priests, and the infection of clericalism, which we see if anybody bothered to read 469 pages of the McCarrick report. The infection of clericalism is, we're in the boys' club. We all defend each other. We don't say anything against anybody else. And anybody who says anything about us is anathema. And to me, there are still people who are in the treehouse and the sign outside says no girls allowed.
I would also, those are wonderful, Phyllis. I didn't post before at the beginning of our conversation about the renewal of the diaconate and diaconal circles. I think Deacon Bill Deitwig has done a lot of work. And so I'm going to put that in the chat, his article on the contemporary renewal of the diaconate, so people can see that as well. Maybe a good question as our time is kind of coming quickly to a close. A good question that came in, and I'll read it verbatim. The questioner says, I'm a mother of 5 daughters, ages 17 to 27. I struggle with the role of women in the church and am trying to guide my daughters as they wrestle with the issue as well. I was wondering if Dr. Zagano might be able to offer some resources for hope for women who choose to continue to practice the Catholic tradition, especially young adult women like my daughters who are so turned off by the patriarchy and clericalism. Do you have any resources for hope that you could offer people?
Gee, thanks for letting me know in advance about the question, Colleen. For me, church is community, and it's not to go see the sage on the stage. It's not to go see the performance. It's to participate. When I go to Mass or I go to any other liturgy, I'm there with people. I like to go to my parish because I know the people, and I know who had the knee replacement, and I know whose husband died, and I know, whose child is trying out for the high school. So I think to encourage younger people, and I think I'll tell you something that happens when younger folks go to Catholic schools. It's wonderful in Catholic colleges, the wonderful formation and the feeling of community, and then blat, they're out when they're graduated, and they're just there. I remember it myself when I first left college, and I was in Boston as a graduate student, and I didn't even know where the church was, and I certainly didn't even know anybody in the church. The parish that will create community is the parish, I think, that will bring hope to individuals and kind of gives meaning to liturgy, because it's not just when you're there, it's when you're walking in and when you're walking out. It's at the Kiss of Peace, which is now at 6 feet with a mask. I tend to go to breakfast, or tended to go to breakfast after Sunday Mass with folks and continuing the conversation. Most of the people I've met in the town I live in now, because I really hadn't lived here that long, I've met around the church. So for her children to have hope in church, it's hope in the people of God who are church, and then going to pray with them, to me is it's exciting, and it's interesting, and it's really comforting to be in the church building with others who believe or are trying to believe as I believe or am trying to believe. So I think that the hope comes not from above, not from the brilliant preacher, not from not from anybody in the hierarchy, but rather from the activity of church, and the kind of, we're all in this together. I see it myself with the local food kitchen. I have a friend who works in the local food pantry here who can't walk down the aisle in the parish church without somebody saying, when is the Thanksgiving basket due? Or, I got a $10 gift certificate at Stop and Shop. I got a phone call today with somebody who has a broken foot, who wants to know if her daughter can drop down to me food pantry money and coupons and things. So, and that to me is, I wrote a column about this. The hopefulness to me of church is the hopefulness of community, and however one finds one's community, whether it's on Zoom or it's in the parish or in the food pantry. I really think that is, and then you get to the finer points of prayer and liturgy, but I think they can be fruitless and useless if they are devoid and divorced from other people.
Mm-hmm. I think that is perfectly said. I don't think, if I had given you that question in advance, I would have gotten a different answer. I like that answer. So Phyllis, and I think what you said, earlier in our conversation, you said, a deacon is a carrier of the gospel. And so it's going out and finding community, being with the people of God, serving in that way, and allowing the people of God to serve each one of us. It's community that we bolster and which grows our faith. And so this wonderful community and this wonderful conversation, we have spent an hour together and it's been blessed. And so I want to thank you, Phyllis. Do you have anything else you'd like to share? We've come to the end of our time, so I don't want to, some questions will carry over to next month. Just as a reminder, we'll be meeting next month on, let me find my paper, December 14th, and then again in January, on January 12th. So you can mark your calendars for that. And if your question wasn't asked, it will roll over to next month. There were a lot of good conversation, a lot of good questions that came in today. But anything else, Phyllis?
Yeah, I want the person who I taught at Fordham to send me an email because I can't see the name on the screen.
We'll make sure you have that. I've got it here, so I'll make sure we have that.
Thank you.
Well, Phyllis, thank you so much, and thank you everyone for taking this time out to be together. We are the church together in one place, and we're the body of Christ, and we're blessed to be together in this space. So thank you so much, and we will look forward to being together next month. Thank you, and have a good night.
Night, night.